Okay, we'll just give it another minute. All right, hello everybody and welcome. My name is Holly Herrick. I'm head of film at Austin Film Society. We are very proud today to be here with the team from Dear Mr. Brody. This is a film that Austin Film Society supported through our grant program and filmmaker support services, and a film that we have been waiting impatiently to see and are just so moved and blown away by the work of this incredible team, this Texas-based team with the film that has just premiered at South by Southwest. I know we have some crew here in the room, and we just want to congratulate everybody on this incredible film, and a film that also is just so, the themes are so resonant to what we're dealing with today. I haven't seen a film like this that addresses inequality in such a particular light, and just so proud of Keith Maitland and Megan Gilbride and Melissa Robyn Glassman here, who are going to be joining us in a second. But I'm also happy today to introduce documentary filmmaker Ron Mann, who is going to be our moderator today. We are going to do some questions from Ron and the film team, and then we will turn it over to the folks in the Zoom room to ask questions of the team. We are recording today, so we will then put this Q&A out there via Austin Film Society social channels. So if you like today's talk, please feel free to share it after the fact. And we are also on Facebook Live, and those who are joining us on Facebook Live, please feel free to put questions there. We'll be toggling back and forth, and we'll get your questions for the Zoom room. So it's my pleasure now to turn it over to a filmmaker who we are huge fans of, the director of Grass and many other great documentaries, Ron Mann. Take it away.
Hi, my role here is as a moderator, and as moderator, I would need to move things along. So with that goal, I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves and maybe share what your contributions were on the film.
I'm going to introduce somebody else because I don't like talking about myself, Ron, but I'm happy and thrilled to talk about my wife, Sarah Wilson, who's here next to me. This is Sarah, who is the cinematographer and one of the 4 producers, all 4 here on this call. Sarah is also, in many ways, the genesis of this project for me, because I found out about this project because of Sarah's friendship with Melissa. Sarah is a wonderful human being. She's a great cinematographer, a beautiful partner. And Sarah, tell them about Melissa.
Melissa Robyn Glassman. We were college roommates back in the day and have had an awesome friendship ever since. And then one day Melissa told me about these letters that she had found, and she brought them to me at a coffee shop in New York when I was visiting, and we started opening them, and we both were crying, and that's where the inspiration started. But Melissa is a producer on this film and a star in this film, and has a lot of experience producing films in the past years, and worked with Ed Pressman and etc. And Melissa, take it away.
About Megan.
Megan Gilbride, how do I begin? Megan, I actually met at my very first South by Southwest. And we had connected not through Keith, but through someone else, because when I was working for Ed, we were looking for an Austin-based producer to do a budget for us on a film. And so I was staying with Sarah and Keith, and I met Megan. And then I found out that Megan and Keith have worked together, and Megan produced Tower with Keith, and along with a ton of other Austin-based films, and produced Michael Brody's film with us. And I guess
And we miss her.
We do miss her. Megan is not with us in Austin right now, which is very sad.
You said not with us, and it sounded like maybe I was dead. Good thing everyone can see my face. I'm not with Queso. It makes me so sad. Well, I was brought onto the film in part with Melissa and Sarah, but through Keith, who said we were finishing up Tower and all of the release of the film, and he was like, "Hey, Sarah and Melissa and I are working on this movie. Let me show you. Have you seen the letters? Have you opened any letters yet?" And so I'm so proud to be here with somebody who's such a formidable director and who
brings so much genuine emotion to his work and to the stories he wants to tell. And we had such an amazing experience working on Tower, and a doubly amazing experience working on Dear Mr. Brody. And I'm just glad we can all be here today like this, even though we can't be here together. I miss you guys.
Yeah.
In both Tower and Dear Mr. Brody are really focus on the dark side of the 60s. And you're a little young to have experienced both Tower and the story of Dear Mr. Brody. So how did you get interested? Like, where does that come from? Like, is it is it something that you think about a lot, or?
I actually think I do understand my draw to looking at stories like this and this time period in particular. I'm going to take a guess right now that one of the members of our audience is Marilyn Franzo Maitland, my mom. If I know her at all, and I know her pretty well, she's probably in the audience on Facebook watching right now. If she's not, maybe taking a nap. And my mom really introduced me to movies in my childhood. She's a total child of the 60s, but kind of missed out on most of the cultural shift that was happening, growing up in her family in a kind of insular community in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. She wasn't a hippie. She didn't go to Woodstock. She wasn't out on the streets marching. But when the 80s rolled through in my childhood, all of those 60s events were hitting their 20th and 25th anniversaries. And my mom, I remember really kind of engaging with that history directly and kind of like for herself, seeing what she had missed and kind of validating some of the feelings she had and reconnecting with her own youth. And for me, I think it was just exciting to kind of witness that history almost through her eyes in some instances. And so I've just always been drawn to stories of the counterculture, that generational shift that happens because of the baby boom and the music and film and politics, really from 1960 to 1986 is like kind of the area that I'm most drawn to.
That story, I've never heard that. I have never heard the story, and I was 12 years old at the time, I just don't know how you. So maybe explain how you found the story and how, because it does epitomize the 60s in a way that is, you can unpack it in so many ways, especially in 1970.
I mean, I think one of the most amazing things about Brody, and we never say this in the film, we don't put like a button on this, it's just, I think, obvious and comes through, is he's kind of the first instant celebrity of the 70s. The event with Michael Brody, for those of you who are watching who haven't had a chance to see the film, Michael James Brody Jr. in January of 1970 is a 21-year-old hippie millionaire. He's inherited $25 million from his grandfather, who was one of the inventors of margarine, for lack of a better accurate description. And he decides to give his money away, and he goes on various shows, Ed Sullivan and the news and whatnot. And he says, I'm giving away my money. We're going to change the world. We're going to bring about world peace. We're going to end the war in Vietnam. We're going to cure cancer and stop poverty, all through this generous act of giving, starting with my 25 million. And if other millionaires join in, this thing could really become a thing. And that happens, like I said, January 10th, 1970. It's 6 months after Woodstock. It's a month after the Manson killings. It's the entire time period is shifting kind of before everyone's eyes. And now the clock has turned and it's a new decade. And the first big news story of this new decade is this kind of flashy, exciting, instant, made for primetime celebrity, and it's a beautiful couple of Renee and Michael together, and they've got a big idea. And it's kind of like, and this is something Ed Pressman always talks about, it's like the ideals of flower power, of hippiedom, meeting, capitalist foundation and exploding, in a positive way. Like that's the idea. And so I think we were all kind of amazed at that sort of character. In the world we live in now, we see internet celebrity and virality. We certainly have lived the last 4 or 5 years talking every day about the role of, celebrity and iconography and, the positive and negative political power of that. And it felt like all of those themes that we're living through all the time are totally wrapped up in the Brody side of the story.
Oh yeah.
But then there's this whole other side of the story, which is actually the story that like speaks to us over and over again. And every time we dip into that side of the story, our hearts are filled and our minds are engaged, and we're challenged to look at our society and to look at ourselves.
You're talking about the letters. So you're referring to the letters.
Yeah.
So Melissa, maybe you can talk about, the film is incredibly inventive, and as a documentary filmmaker, you're always trying to figure out like how to tell the story, and the story comes alive in you with the discovery of the letters, and it's almost like it's fashioned like a mystery. So could you talk about how you formed this inventive structure, and also where you were working for Ed Pressman at the time, and maybe you could let people know a little bit of the background and how the letters themselves came to just really become the grace of the story.
Sure, yeah. So many years ago, I was working for Ed Pressman, who, for those of you who don't know, is an independent producer who has a great list of films to his name. The Crow, Thank You for Smoking, American Psycho, Wall Street, the list goes on and on. And I was working for him in New York, and I'd gone to Los Angeles where he had a storage unit. And while I was there, I had noticed that there were about 12 boxes of letters that all had the name Brody. I'm sorry, yes, 12 boxes that all had the name Brody on them. And when I opened them and saw what was inside, it was letters, all to the same person, Michael Brody Jr. There's some of them are behind me and here in boxes. And it's kind of hard to explain the feeling I had when I saw them. It just immediately felt, like I was opening up something. Obviously, I saw that they were from 1970, so there was a kind of eerie feeling to them because they were so old. And when I kind of started to understand from Ed what they were about and who Michael Brody was, they became even more special to me because of all the stories that they represented of people. And as we started to open them together as a group and as a team, we kind of saw that that's really was the heart of the story, is who Michael inspired, and all across the world, and not just in New York where his story was, but across the country and then across the world. And we just really, that's where we personally connected. It's what we personally connected to, were all those voices. And then, Keith kind of brought in the various kind of ideas of how to incorporate that story within Michael's story, and use all the different things to make it into one beautiful piece.
The great thing about the letters is, it's also an artifact, a historical artifact, and almost, in telling stories historical stories, you use historical artifacts to illustrate the story. But this just took on the artifact itself. It became a focus of the film, was there anyone that you contacted that was really pissed after so many years of opening up the letters? Because a lot of these letters were not open.
Who wants to take that one? There were, surprisingly, the majority of people we did reach out to, it was quite positive. There were a few who decided to not participate. They wanted to just keep the past in the past. I think Keith had, a couple of those phone calls.
Yeah, let me, because I think I love that question. I mean,
Yeah.
the number one thing about this, and obviously this makes a lot more sense if you've seen the film. There's a lot of letters.
Yes.
There's a lot of letters. Okay, there's a lot, and there's a lot of letters in the film, and there's a lot of letters that didn't make it into the film.
Yeah.
And that's always the number one thing. Like, how do you choose? We made a documentary a couple years ago, Sarah and I, about Austin City Limits, where we had to tell the story of the show over the course of 40 years. And the number one thing is like, who do you include and who do you leave out, and how do you justify these subjective decisions? You accept that it's subjective, and you say, like, these are the people that have a story that I can relate to, and these are people that have a story that I'm excited to tell, and these are the people that have a story that challenge me to look at the world differently. These are the people that surprised me. These are the letters that disarmed me. But the process of that was really, I mean, I don't know that we'll ever have a project like this again, but every single person on this call read hundreds or thousands of letters and took notes, and we started trading with each other because we split them up. Megan would read a pile, Sarah would read a pile, I'd read a pile, Melissa, and then we'd have, again, my mom would come in and read letters. Sarah's folks came in and read letters. Megan's mom came down and was in the film, as is Melissa's mom, as an extra. But we had interns and friends and family, and we'd just read letters. And what we found over and over again were multiple themes were bubbling up that, we could start kind of creating categories almost. And many, many letters were uncategorizable or didn't, sat in multiple categories, of course. But it really boiled down to like who felt something, in their heart when they read something. And it's like, if Megan read Holly Hodgkin's letter, who's in the film, I remember the moment she sent the email and she's like, I just read this incredible letter, Holly Hodgkin's. And then I read the letter and my first thought was like, well, I've read a lot of letters that are just like this. I'm not sure why this one speaks to Megan. But then a few weeks later, after reading multiple other letters that are also kind of just like it, I kept coming back to Holly, and I was like,
is it as good as that one?
That's right.
Yeah.
And Megan felt it initially, and then we all kind of grew to feel it. And then that became, to get back to your question, the first person we connected with that was like this incredible feeling of tracking down our letter writers. And that moment, fortunately, is in the film. It was captured because we just shot a lot of footage of Melissa cold calling letter writers. But I will say, like, there were no letter writers that were, I don't remember a single instance, you guys jumped in, I don't remember anyone who picked up the phone when we reached out to them who said, yes, I remember writing that letter and I am mad that I didn't get money. I don't think we got any of that.
Right.
They were more like, I don't know if I want to get back into that part of my life. They might not want to revisit it on film, but nobody was angry about not getting money. But I also feel like as we were sorting through the letters that we were looking, we started to realize that we could kind of mirror Michael Brody's life with the letters that we were opening. Like one letter might carry us into, like, for instance, when the media is going crazy. Like there was one letter where a woman is warning him about what's going to happen if he keeps, putting himself out there, and she's like, the masses will get meaner. So that letter rose to the top is, how do we like bring the story along? And then, letters about relationships and family relationships kind of mirrored what Michael Brody was maybe even lacking in his own, personal upbringing. So I think we were choosing almost like archetypes along the way to help us tell the story.
And it also too, it's like, it was a very emotional process. Like to sit here and say, like, I think it's easy from like, oh, it's a filmmaking standpoint where like, we all divided up letters, we all read letters. There was advocating, like they were like, I love this one, I love this line, I love this person. Like we fell for people, but also like, as Sarah said, what Sarah said, like, is this letter as good as this letter? And it's like, I will say that we all also had to develop our own personal, what was it, like a meditation or something, when it was like, we also connected, like we saw the people in the letter. It wasn't like, this is a letter and is it dramatic or is it, is it artful? Is it like, we really tried to make sure that even for people who didn't get into the movie, that like, we always held space for them, because we opened up this piece of them that was, oftentimes so personal, so raw, like almost like reading somebody's diary. and people they poured out their hearts to Michael Brody, and we really wanted to make space for that and honor that. And so I think there's a lot of honoring that in the movie, but there was also a lot of like honoring the things that didn't make it in the film for us in the process of picking letters that got in and that didn't.
Well, it's incredibly moving to watch them read it on screen. And, I would encourage, Melissa was saying a number of the letters are going to an archive in Colombia, I think you were mentioning. So the fact that those will be available for people to read, their stories live on, which is really fantastic. I was thinking of the dark side just only because it reminded me of Preston Sturges's movie Sullivan's Travels, where the director, not Preston Sturges, but Sullivan in the movie, gives out dollar bills to vagrants, and he gets beat up when they find out that he's carrying a lot of cash, and that's sort of the dark side. And in a funny way, this also, you take it to the 60s, it reminds me of Donovan a bit, or like Season of the Witch. It has that all, this forebodance of
Ron, I'm just going to jump in only because I hope that our editor Austin Reedy is watching if he can, and right now he's buzzing with you talking about those things exactly, because that is Donovan. First of all, we use Donovan in Tower, and we had Donovan in this film very deep into the editorial process. It is very Season of the Witch, and it's exactly that kind of. There's something about that dark. It's interesting you see it as darkness, because I see it as like darkness, but it's undercut by light.
Well,
like,
that's the letters of like, oh my God. It's just, that's the hope, and those stories are so moving, and they're just so, I really did that. My takeaway was, when don't mean to, my reaction to this was, it evoked Allen Ginsberg for me, who once said, I think in Howl, that, I dream of this world where I'd walk in to buy groceries with just a smile. In other words, money is not, the anti-materialistic spirit and the, and the feeling of, whatever in 1966 that, love will actually basically, that hippie dream is so alive with the movie, and it's crushed somehow. And I guess, that's this one, and it's this wonderful tale that you tell with just the, with so many different themes, like you said in the letters that they've come out, that it just, I just think of philanthropists today watching that and see what it is, so I do see it more relevant than a 60s story, because of the individuals. And Holly at the beginning mentioned the whole thing about the, inequality, that is resonant more and more, by just the humanity that you demonstrate in this movie. To me, the film was so inventive on so many different levels that, it's masterful. It's just an incredible movie. Anyway, that's me running away with being a terrible moderator.
That sounds more like a statement than a question to me, Ron.
We'll take
I know. Anyway, it's just one of the things that bothers me a bit is the anti-drug possibility of this thing being seen as an anti-drug film. And I did speak with somebody who did say, well, this is going to weaponize the right, and it's like, I don't see that perspective. So I'm just wondering, to me, the mental illness part was very dominant. And I'm just wondering if that I think that overrides everything, quite frankly. Like because I wouldn't be here if this was an anti-drug, to be honest with you. But I do feel like this we're in an age today of where mental illness is like, we're talking about it for the first time, and this film contributes to that. And I think it's important. And I'm wondering, has that been in and even in Tower, it was the same thing. So is mental illness now a theme that is like on your minds, and what your perspective is on that?
I mean, I think, you know, there's arguments easily to be made that thanks, Holly. I just saw the note. Yeah. There's arguments to be made that both stories in Tower and Brody, you know, are kind of the reaction when one man, you know, kind of makes an audacious social move. It's about the reaction to that one man's ripple, right? Now, of course, they're very different ripples, and I don't mean to minimize, you know, or equate the two in ways that they don't deserve to be compared, because the intention couldn't be more, you know, different. But there is something about how do the multifacets of society react and respond to something that happens, you know, to them, and who sees it as an opportunity to kind of step into the breach and become the fullest version of themselves, and who, you know, isn't able to access that and has a different reaction. There's something I'm really drawn to. I mean, you know, what a huge fan I am of Altman. Ron directed the Altman documentary a few years ago, and if he hadn't, I'd be trying to work on that right now. But like, you know, I was talking about this with Holly last night, because she brought up the multi-character, multi-perspective approach to storytelling that I've embraced a few times, or kind of actually every time. I've made 4 features and they've all been multi-protagonist. And I think it's because my eyes are bigger than my stomach, and I can't ever settle on just one, you know, story, just one approach, or just one facet. And so that was also a part of this, is like, how many facets can we include? And then what's the balancing act of actually being good at our job of storytelling and captivating an audience, and not putting people off, and not pushing people away, but not leaving something on the table. And so, to be honest with you, back to when you talk about mental health is something that's spoken about pretty directly in the film right now, but there were earlier cuts where we felt like, oh, that's coming across and we don't need to kind of like directly address it. And we shared it with an early, you know, kind of editorial feedback audience, you know, 2 years ago now. And it was the first thing that came up in the Q&A afterwards, is everyone said, you know, mental illness and mental health is happening. Questions about it are swirling all throughout this film, but you never actually address it directly. And usually my feeling as a storyteller is like, well, if the questions are being swirled, then we are addressing it. It's your job to answer questions on your own. My job is to pose questions, and hopefully in an order that is exciting.
But then we found like one little piece of paper, like from a hospital, with a diagnosis of
that changed things for us, because we weren't able to kind of put a button on what we were trying to say before that moment. But because the audience, the test audience or the editorial feedback audience, let us know, like, hey, you might be missing something here, and something important. And it was interesting, is right after we made the decision to put some focus into that, we started seeing it everywhere, like the stories about it. And you realize, like, this world is, I think that's one of the messages of the film that we are constantly being reminded of as we made it, is there are issues and stories and problems unfolding for our fellow man all the time, in every direction. And most of the time we don't notice. Most of the time, if they don't impact us directly, we're not even aware. We're either ignorant or thoughtless, or we put our heads in the sand. And with these letters, you couldn't do that. Like for us, once we started opening letters, you couldn't do that. And it was interesting, as we started like looking at these questions of mental illness, we realized, like, oh, we can't do that either. Like, you can't put our head in the sand. Like, this is an opportunity to talk about something directly, and not just ask questions, but ask the kind of questions that allow people to actually do something with that for their lives. And I don't know, at the end of the day, that's, I think, what we're going for.
Well, here's a question, and I'm sure people have their own, but is it possible to give out money without being called nuts? I mean, when I was trying to, it made me really think about, like, it just seems crazy for someone to give out money, and can you actually give it out with you know, can you be giving all that money out seems totally crazy, right? So it seems sort of obvious, but back then, and now even, like, is it really, can you actually, I don't know, it was something that when I watched the movie, I thought, well, why is that nuts?
I think if you can be organized about it. I'm sorry, go ahead, Mel.
No, you go ahead.
No, I just think that he didn't have a system and he didn't have a team to help him dole it out. And I mean, maybe it was a wild idea. I mean, it was from his heart, but it just got out of control. And I mean, I can't imagine,
the media. That's what Keith said at the beginning with the celebrity and that beginning of just being,
But I think also to your
balance.
point, like he definitely gave money away in a way that was challenging to his own lifestyle. Like there are lots of people who are very wealthy who have committed to giving away, all of their fortunes, but it's like, I have $1 billion, I'm going to give away 50 billion, but I have my billion. And it's like, Brody was giving, I mean, I think if somebody had, $200,000 and they gave away $195,000, I think you might ask them what's up with their thinking. And I think Brody actually kind of gave in that way. And I think that is a question that would get asked of people, where money that they quote unquote need, like, why would they be giving it away?
One question, just as a documentary filmmaker, this film, did it evolve, or did you have like this all set at the beginning? Because it's so difficult to raise money now with if a film is sort of evolving. And speaking to Robert Altman, he said, the film will tell you what it's going to be. Like now as documentary filmmakers, we don't have that luxury anymore. We have to have a teaser trailer. We have to, and this movie also came from a movie that wasn't funded, from Ed Pressman, who wanted to make this into a dramatic film, which is why he saved those letters. So I'm just wondering, did you have this idea with letters at the beginning, like this whole inventive thing, or was it a process of just over time that it evolved?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of all of that. I mean, it certainly evolved constantly. And I would say the biggest thing that evolved was figuring out Melissa's relationship to the film, because she was not the first to suggest that she be an on-camera participant. As a matter of fact, there was a little bit of arm twisting that went on for a period of months.
Good decision, whoever made it.
Hey, thanks. That's Melissa made that decision.
It was because Keith, I trust Keith as a filmmaker, and he really strongly felt that was the way through, and the team agreed, and I trust.
It was just, to be honest with you, here's what we knew at the beginning, Ron. We knew that there were all these letters, and we knew that Brody's story is a real story. It's got a beginning, it's got an end. We knew there was footage, and it was cool. He was neat. We liked the idea, but the letters are what grabbed us initially. That's how we became aware of the stories, through Melissa. And as we started reading those letters, like, we just started imagining the letter writers. You can't help, if you're a cinematic, visual person, of like imagining these kitchens, these offices, the back rooms where people, and I imagined Chris Dubek, the actor, literally, I imagine him, in the dark, and I imagine him washing his hands and then writing a letter. I imagine a 6-year-old girl like stacking yellow pages to get up to the table with a crayon to write her letter. We never even shot that one. I started imagining these scenes, and I was telling Sarah about them, and we were worried about these imaginings, Ron. I will tell you, like, these are recreations, and recreations are difficult to get right. And we'd come off a good experience with recreation, and everything in me said, maybe don't do that again, like, let that one live on its own. And but we kept imagining these letter writers, and so that was like the original idea. I think it was like, we knew Brody had an interesting and good story, and that there was lots to work with in there. We knew that Renee and Jamie were alive, and that we hoped we could connect with them, and we knew that we had access to these letters, and that's about all we knew. And thanks to the great producing of Megan Gilbride, when it came time to pitch this idea with not very much put together about what it could be, I remember being in the taxi on the way to one of our first pitches and saying, like, I just don't know exactly what this thing's going to be, Megan. And Megan said, lead with that. And that's what we did. We went into the pitch and we put the letters down on the table. We just put the letters right on the table in front of them. And we said,
that's advice I
don't
would
even
never
know what this is going to be.
That's advice I would never give. I'm just saying that only in this one moment, it was very early in the morning in this taxi, only in this moment would I ever give that advice.
But we spent a lot of time figuring it out. We bounced ideas off of each other. You know, we didn't end up going down too many paths that we had to like backtrack because we were talkers. I'm a talker. They're also talkers when given the chance, when I shut up. So we bounced the ideas around a lot, and we're very fortunate that like we have all these great actors through the Austin Film Network and community, like Chris Dubeck, like Frank Mosley, Rebecca Beagle. You know, we met Jessica Thompson through this process. We just like, there were so many like really great experiences and a way to kind of invite people into this process. You know, Andrew Bujalski does a little voiceover bit in the film.
It's so Texas stuff.
So it was just, you know, the process was a constant evolution.
Yeah. I mean, I was marveled by also the art direction, to be honest with you, and the cinematography. You know, it's like, it was like, you know, D'Antonio once said, Emil D'Antonio, the political documentary filmmaker, once said that documentaries are an art form and it evolves. And that's why I see Brody in the same way of that change in the evolution of documentary as an art form. I mean, it is the multiple stories, but it is the way you can make a film out of letters. Like it's not something that anything can, I don't know, it's so inventive. Anyway, Holly says that we have some questions from people. So I'm going to move that over to Holly. Is that the idea, or
Thanks,
what should
Ron.
I do?
Yeah, we've got a little bit of time for audience questions, but Ron, you raised a question that I was hoping the team could answer, which is about the art direction and the design. I mean, you all came from sort of a beautiful previous film with Tower and animation and such a big production. And I'm curious, I just wanted to hear the answer to Ron's question about the art direction.
Like so many things we do that is a team effort. I wouldn't even call it an effort. It's a team game. Like we make art direction a game around here because we're always trying to go for Mad Men. That's what I want. I want to do like the sharpest little bit of period capture, but I also want there to be a slight haze in the air that says like this is imagination. And whether it's the animation of Tower, which was honoring like memory as a concept, or for this, recognizing like every letter recreation we do is intended to represent our imagination and not reality. And so we all, we go thrifting together.
We use a digital Bolex camera, kind of like a throwback to an old film camera. I think that helped with kind of like the grain and the grit of those recreations. Yeah, we borrowed the digital Bolex as a C-mount lens. For any camera nerds out there, the C-mount is a very not complicated 16 millimeter lens format. And like our friend David Hartstein loaned us his grandpa's 16 millimeter lenses, and a chunk of the movie was shot, through those vintage. But yeah, I feel like there were like 3 efforts. It was the digital Bolex for the recreation. It was still photographs for the letters, which I was usually taking on a little copy stand over here in the office. And then there's the Canon for the interviews.
And then the collages, which
should be,
like, I can't believe, John Mark Lapham is the artist who created the collages. He's a friend. He's actually somebody we met in when we were making Tower. We were, just always kind of trolling for creative, collaborators. And John Mark kind of came through the transom when we were making Tower, but there wasn't, necessarily a spot to work with him on that. But I just stayed connected. And then we were pretty deep into Brody, about halfway through the process probably, and we knew we were looking for one more visual element to round this thing out. And he posted some of these collages he had made as music videos on Facebook. And I literally, within 5 seconds of seeing him, I said, this is what we've been missing. It reminded me of Monty Python. It reminded me of the letters. So many of the letters are, collaged and cut out from magazines and newspapers. And so yeah, literally 15 minutes later, I was on the phone with John Mark, and he was working with us.
I also want to shout out Melissa is a secret amazing costumer in terms of the thrifting and fitting and finding. So oftentimes there would be like a letter with maybe a theme and maybe a piece of clothing. And then the question was like, is it going to stick in the movie on a person? Is it going to be a scene that we shoot? And like, sometimes the matrix would change, like which letter got like which piece of clothing and which actor and which location. Like we had that happen more than one time.
That's brilliant. I mean, look at behind Melissa is like a collage, right, of the letters that she's got up there, which is so fantastic.
And the box.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, Holly, sorry. If there's any questions that you all have.
Yeah, so there's a few more. One, somebody asked, how much money did Brody actually give out? Was that a question you chose not to answer, or one that wasn't possible to answer? Yeah.
I think the short answer is it's not completely possible to answer because we don't actually know. I think from fairly conservative counts that we've been able to put together, and talking to Andy Janquito, who wrote the book, and talking to Jamie, who I see is in attendance here. And Jamie, jump into the thing here if I'm wrong, but I think we estimated that he gave out a little over maybe $250,000. Does that sound right, Melissa?
So
Melissa might.
Froze a second.
oh, froze. Am I still frozen?
You're back.
No, you're back.
Okay, I think so.
Jamie says here in the text, he says he gave out all he had access to. His estate was bankrupt at his death.
Jamie is Michael's son.
Right.
Got it. And so, and in terms of answering that in the film, what was your thinking on sort of what you had access to versus what you could guess about?
You know, I think it's funny, like, I don't know that we spent a ton of energy on this. Like, I think what we realized is we didn't have it. Like, there wasn't, like, nobody came out and said this. And it honestly wasn't something that really even was like that interesting to us, because we could see as we were doing it that that wasn't what this is about. And it was kind of obvious, like whatever it wasn't a lot in the scheme of 25 million.
It's a MacGuffin, I think, is the.
Well, there's also kind of like rules, I think, for us about how information could come into the story, right? And so it was like from a letter or from a piece of archival footage or from a newspaper or, you know, or a report or from one of our characters. And none of those sources had access to that information. And so the story didn't really either.
Mm-hmm.
So we just have time for a few more, but there's a question, you talk a little bit, Keith, about how you sort of decided to raise the questions rather than answer them. But this person was curious about your take on his mental illness in particular, and sort of what were the seeds. I mean, I think you tie it all together in the film between there's, you know, but it's hard to say what was the start and what was the, you know, impetus for this crazy 10 days. So this person just wants to know sort of what your theory is on what was the initial mental illness and what exacerbated it, or if you wanted to expound on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to hear what the rest of the team thinks. Like, I personally don't have a strong opinion one way or another, because one of the tragedies of making this film is that we did not get to know Michael. We got to know all of these letter writers. We got to know Jamie, and that's been wonderful. We've gotten to know Renee, as much as Renee chooses to share with us. But we haven't gotten to know Michael fully. We know him through the footage, and we know him through Renee's memory of him. And honestly, you can't paint a vivid or an accurate picture. You can paint a vivid picture, but not an accurate picture. And so we didn't strive for accuracy. And I never personally felt the draw to try and put too fine a point on it, because I don't know, it feels a little bit like a perfect storm.
I felt like there was a picture, there are photographs at the very end of the movie that were slides that I think Jamie may have given to us right towards the end, that kind of like bring it all together. And they're pictures of Michael with Jamie in the car or something like that. It's toward the end of the movie. And they are so sweet and like clear. And I feel like it's this, I felt like I got to know Michael even deeper just from like 3 photographs towards the end that to me were heartbreaking and really sweet, and kind of showed a lot about his character. But it's interesting how a few images can kind of like bring it all together. So.
And this on a similar, well, slightly different note, but in terms of the impact and the message, there's a couple questions about this. One is what happened to Bunny. She's an amazing character and somebody who we see was directly impacted by his, philanthropy early on. But then also another attendee wants to know if other people were moved by this message and if there was sort of ripple effects of his giving that maybe inspired others, or if there were other sort of positive sort of light brought into the universe from Michael's sort of desire for love and healing.
I think we never were able to locate, like, for sure, a philanthropic group or somebody like that who really who was like, I'm the next millionaire I want to do it and give money away. But I will tell you, we opened countless letters from people that included money or checks. I mean, I don't think it's in there. The guy who was like, I have $2 left in my bank account and I'm giving it to you.
That's Sxsw. That's Sxsw.
Oh no, right, yeah, right. So it's like there was a lot of that in the letters, and so that's actually kind of when Ron, you were talking about like the darkness around it and the people who kind of like glommed onto Michael and how it kind of became this other tone. Like, in the letters, it is something entirely different. There was a lot of inspiration and love and admiration and like support and saying like, here's a charity I give to if you want to give to them, but then also here's like what I'm doing, or just people who just would write letters and say, I think what you're doing is beautiful and I love it, and I just want to tell you that I love it. And that was, always overwhelming and wonderful to find.
So I want to make sure we get to this one since we're running out of time here. For a lot of people are asking who have not seen it at South by, what's next for the film and where can they see it? And then what's next for this incredible team, since you guys are just churning out the hits between this film and Tower. So let us know.
Thank you. I do want to just to give a little respect to Bunny, because Bunny Jones is also one of our favorites. And we became aware of Bunny through finding her in footage, which is the most exciting thing as a filmmaker, and then we saw this woman in footage and we said, wow, she looks really involved and she says a couple of really great things. And then in looking around, what we discovered is that she is one of those characters that kind of different people had different perspectives on, and what her role was. But it wasn't until we really met her son, Chris, who's featured in the film, that we got such a great kind of insight into who Bunny was. And honestly, Bunny Jones could have a movie. She could have 3 seasons of a series, on AMC. She's so great. In a nutshell, I'll just tell you, like, Bunny Jones, she owned all those beauty salons in Harlem. She was also a music manager. She owned a record label. She opened up the studio that she was trying to with Brody. It didn't last very long.
Songwriter.
She was a songwriter, and she lays some claim that she helped discover Jimi Hendrix, because she discovered Jimi Hendrix when he was homeless in New York on his stint between being in the military and going to London, and he crashed on the floor at Bunny's house for a week when he really needed some help. She was there. We love Bunny. She's great. As far as what's next for us, I don't know. The world is very confused right now. We spent all of last year not releasing this film and trying to develop lots of other things. Megan has a super exciting new film with Drew Xanthopoulos. I don't know how public it is, so I'll let her talk about that film if she wants to, but it's awesome. And that's...
It is a movie.
It is a movie.
It will come out. It is a movie, it will come out. Those are 2 things I'll say. Yes.
We love it.
There you go.
They should follow you guys maybe to find out about next festivals or next screenings for this film.
Yeah, please. Dear Mr. Brody on Twitter, on Instagram. We have a Facebook group. We don't know what the future is for this film rolling out, but we hope that it, like everybody, we hope that it has a robust, opportunity to engage with audiences. We're looking forward to the World Book opening back up so we can actually see you beautiful people in person, and the film can engage with people, and create the community that it's intended to.
And also, if you follow on those social channels, whenever the letters are actually in Colombia and you can go visit them and open them yourself, that will be a day we're really excited about. So if that's an interesting idea to you to go in and open your own Brody letters, you'll be able to.
Yeah.
Yeah, just lots of love for the film. People want posters, and which I agree. It's just the sort of how visually coherent the movie is. It's just incredible. So thank you all so much for joining us. This has been just so much fun to hear from you. Congratulations. I think we've got somebody on Zoom who might want to connect with you guys, who is asking about Michael's brother or sibling, and might know the family. So maybe you should connect with them via their website. But thank you all so much for coming. And anything else you want to share with us before we say goodbye today?
Go see the movie.
Thank you.
Yeah, we just want to say thank you. Thanks to Holly and to Ron and to South by Southwest. And I personally just want to thank these three incredible women that I get to work with. It's the challenge and privilege of a lifetime to get to make these kind of work, and to do it with a team like this is no challenge. It's all good.
And AFS, thank you, AFS.
Thank you, AFS.
Congratulations, Sarah.
And thank you to the Brody family, to Jamie and Renee, and to all of our letter writers, because obviously you're what gets us here, and you're what gets us excited about this film. Thank you.
Thanks so much. All right, thanks everybody. Bye-bye.
Oh, it's still streaming.
Yes, still streaming in South by till tomorrow.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So go watch it.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Bye.
you, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.